Well, hello world. Just be who you be. It's one of my favorite lines. I don't know where it came from, but just be who you be. I was walking up here, I was coming up to the school actually. It's one of those moments in life. My son's going to kindergarten. It's one of those moments where you decide whether or not to use the school system. It might be a limited thing. But anyway, I was walking up here and I saw this dandelion in its seed mode, or actually it was another plant like it, and all the seeds were blowing in the wind. I watched how they were all dispersed, and how without the wind they would have little chance of getting anywhere at all. And of course I thought of the metaphor for the wind moving along the seeds of intention, the current that takes our thoughts and manifests some of them and others not so much. So I started thinking about the ocean metaphor as well, the ebb and flow of the tides and the ups and downs and the troughs and the peaks of the waves, and how one of the important lessons I've learned is that every peak has a trough and vice versa. We live in a world that sometimes you're going to feel good, sometimes you're not going to feel so good, and we deal with it best we can, but we do our best. And sometimes it's not enough, but what is enough, I guess. I was thinking about how people beat up on themselves for being just themselves, Actually, earlier I was thinking, to what degree do we penalize ourselves for just being ourselves? And I guess I never really came to a conclusion on the subject. It was, what I was thinking was, some people are very self-critical, some people not so much. And many of us are either too critical of ourselves or not critical enough. And then there are many people who try to be balanced. I try to be as balanced as I can. I know I have faults, but I'm aware of them and I admit them, and that's the most important thing for me. But I still have faults that I don't consider faults, and over time I'll try to build that integrity. But some people think they're untouchable, their shit doesn't stink. We all know the kind, but I think most people have a pretty good grasp on being themselves. Some people, though, are way too harsh on themselves, and they beat themselves up over small things, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. It's just, I've seen a lot of people who just don't like, they say they don't like themselves, and they seem to be very negative, and they don't have very much faith in mankind at all. Maybe bad things have happened, they've been wronged. I know how it is, Life can be unfair. I lost my dad when I was like 15, and it was devastating. It sucked. At the time, I didn't realize how bad it really, affected me, but, we were close, and I lived with him and loved him. It was one of those things where we trivialize the small things in life, and sometimes I guess we get too wrapped up in the little stuff. Instead of worrying about what's really important or what really matters, we question our own motives and our own integrities. We embarrass ourselves. We get angry. It's just being human. It's just who we are. Debating about the points of life is, irrelevant. This is, I guess, the representation of what I was talking about, one of these things. The different currents. The thing about wind is that it's invisible. And that's the beauty of it. It's an invisible force that carries and does so much for the landscape. And I feel like we have spiritual wind. It's very similar. It's something that can't be seen, but it can be felt. Can't really be explained except for through, each person has to find their own truth, whatever it may be. I don't know. I had more to say, but my mind tends to wander, and I lose my train of thought a lot. Repeat myself, but I don't beat myself up over it. I'm just a human. I'm just a human doing the best I can with what I got. Kicking around some pine cones, hanging out at the park. When I was walking down here, I thought to myself of how connected I felt at the moment to the world around me. And it made me think about how sometimes maybe I'm, it's funny, let me use weed as an example. The right amount of weed will make you feel very bonded and connected. You smoke too much very high potency weed, for a lot of people, it makes them feel disassociated and not comfortable around people. I get that way. Everything done in moderation helps some people in some way, but can also harm, in the same way. A small dose of kratom gives you motivation, a large dose makes you sedated. And not just things we consume, but anyway, everything in moderation. And I've found that sometimes I'm walking around and I feel really connected to people around me, and sometimes I don't. And so I embrace the times I do, because that's one of the peaks, in life. But all in all, I feel very complete. I feel like I truly love being alive. But I don't fool myself and say, well, I'm not bothered by the small stuff. I'm not bothered by the really small stuff, the trivialities of society. But anything that's maybe small to me, I have to analyze and say, if this is a small thing to me, is it large to someone else I love maybe, or just society in general? So I think we have to question our motives and everything we do, and just be who you be. That's all we got. Namaste.